The woman discovers that her sister is in a coma in the hospital, but what her niece tells her makes her drop everything and call the police. The phone rang in the middle of the afternoon, breaking the silence of Clara's small apartment. The sound was insistent. She thought carefully before answering. The last time an unknown number appeared on the screen, it was a telemarketing scam, but for some reason she decided to answer. "Hello?" Her voice came out suspiciously on the other end of the line. The other end of the line. There was a pause, then a serious, blunt male voice. "Are you Clara Vasquez?" "Yes, it's me. This is Dr. Emilio Ortega. I'm a doctor at Houston General Hospital. Are you Valentina Vasquez's sister?" Her sister's name hit her like a punch in the stomach. The air disappeared. For a second, the past she had spent years trying to forget came rushing back like a storm. "What happened?" she asked, her mouth dry. The doctor hesitated before continuing, as if those words would change everything. "Valentina has been admitted. She was in a serious accident. She is in critical condition, in a coma." Clara felt the ground disappear beneath her. The phone almost slipped from her sweaty hand. She had to lean on the table to keep from falling. "What? What do you mean in a coma? What happened to her?" "We can't give details over the phone, but it's best if you come as soon as possible. Her condition is delicate." Clara's heart raced. 8 years. 8 years without seeing Valentina. 8 years without a call, without a message. 8 years pretending that it didn't hurt, that everything was fine, that moving on was the right thing to do. But now, time seemed to be running out. "Is there anyone with her?" she asked, feeling the weight of the answer. The doctor paused before answering. "Only her husband, Tomas. Her parents are on their way." The name set off an alarm inside Clara. She never trusted him, even before he left. There was something about him that made her uncomfortable. But Valentina was in love, and who was she to interfere now? Her sister was between life and death, and he was the only person by her side. Clara looked around her apartment. The desk was still full of reports she had to deliver. The pile of bills was waiting to be paid. Her life was there, in the organized chaos she had built for herself, but none of that mattered now. She picked up her bag with trembling hands. Before leaving, she looked at her reflection in the living room mirror. Her face was pale, her eyes reflecting something she couldn't see. For a long time, fear of what she would find, fear that it was too late, but above all, fear of the answer to the question she never had the courage to ask. Why Valentina never looked for her, and, more importantly, if she knew she was dying, would she have called Clara? The drive to Houston was a whirlwind. Clara gripped the steering wheel tightly, her knuckles white as the road stretched out before her, each kilometer bringing a new knot in her chest. Time seemed to be playing with her, moving too slowly, as if it wanted her to feel every second of that anguish. The radio was off. The silence forced her to face her own thoughts, and they came like a storm. 8 years without seeing Valentina. She never thought it would be so long at first. They still sent messages and made sporadic calls. Then the conversations became shorter until one day they simply stopped, without fights, without a final goodbye, just silence. Clara wanted to believe that Valentina hated her for leaving. That made it easier to deal with the weight inside her. But deep down, she knew the truth was different. She was the one who had abandoned her sister, and now it might be too late. A memory came like a blow. 2 girls holding hands, sitting on the roof of their house, looking at the stars. "We'll be together forever, right?" Valentina asked Clara, with childish hope in her voice. "Of course, I promise. But promises mean nothing when life gets in the way." Clara had to leave. Houston. The past suffocated her, crushed her. The house where she grew up. The divided family. The silent pain that no one dared to speak aloud. She thought she was saving herself. But what about Valentina? Clara never knew how her sister was after she left. If she cried, if she felt anger. She sped to the hospital, but it was still far away. This time, however, she would not run away. The hospital was a cold and impersonal world, full of white corridors and the smell of medicine that clung to her skin. Clara felt her footsteps on the shiny floor as she moved slowly, as if each step were a weight crushing her chest. Her heart was beating fast, but her breathing was short, as if she could not fill her lungs completely. She wasn't ready. She wasn't ready to see Valentina like this, but there was no other option. The doctor guided her to the door of the room, and for a moment Clara hesitated. Her hand touched the cold doorknob, and a million thoughts raced through her mind. Would she feel her presence? Would she know somewhere inside that sleeping body that Clara had finally come? The answer came in a whisper from the doctor. She hasn't reacted. The damage was severe. Those words weighed like stones on her chest. Then she opened the door. The air in the room was heavy, filled only with the rhythmic sound of the machines that kept her alive. And there she was, Valentina, so different from the last time she saw her. Her face, once full of life, was pale, almost colorless. Small bruises stained her delicate skin, like shadows of a pain that no one wanted to see. Strands of her dark hair were scattered over the pillow, and her eyes, those eyes that always had a special light, were closed, motionless, sealed in a cruel silence. Clara felt her legs tremble, and a lump formed in her throat, so strong that it hurt. She approached slowly, her fingers trembling, seeking to touch her sister's hand. It was cold. Clara's voice came out broken, almost like a whisper. No response. Nothing but the sound of the machines. But then something caught her attention on the small table next to the bed. There was a small pile of yellowed letters, worn by time. The name Clara was written on the first one. She reached out and took the envelope carefully, feeling the rough paper under her fingers, as if it were a piece of the past that should never have been forgotten. What were those letters? Why were they there, intact? And above all, why had Clara never received them? Questions piled up in her mind, but one thing was certain. Those letters was a truth she could no longer ignore. The paper trembled between Clara's fingers. The yellowed corners of the letters seemed to have absorbed time, carrying years of unread words. Her handwritten name was slightly faded, as if touched by trembling fingers or tears. She swallowed hard and sat down on the armchair next to Valentina's bed, still unable to look at her for long. Her eyes fixed on the letter, and with almost ceremonial care slid her fingers under the flap of the envelope and took out the paper. The handwriting was unmistakable, small and delicate, but with strokes that gave away her nerves. Clara took a deep breath before starting to read. "Clara, I miss you every day. Do you still think of me?" The question stabbed her in the chest. The air in the room seemed to disappear. Valentina's words crossed time and distance, breaking the barrier of silence that Clara had imposed for so long. She wanted to respond. She wanted to shout, "Yes, Valentina, I thought of you every day." But the reality was more cruel. The letters were there, stacked intact, and Clara never received them. Why? She turned the pages of the letter, hoping to find answers. But all she found were more words full of nostalgia. "I hope you are happy. I know that life took you far away. I always imagined that one day I would knock on your door and you would welcome me with a hug. Will that day ever come?" Clara pressed the letter against her chest and closed her eyes tightly. No, that day never came. Valentina waited for a hug that never came, and now all that was left was a fragile body connected to cables and machines. Unable to ask again if her sister still thought of her. Clara's hands were cold, but inside her, something began to burn. Why didn't Valentina ever call? Why didn't anyone tell her that she wrote? And the most disturbing question of all, who prevented these letters from reaching her? The silence in the room brought no answers, but Clara knew there was someone who might have them, and that someone was not lying in that bed. The silence in the room was broken by a sound, the sharp sound of footsteps approaching, heavy, firm, calculated. Clara sensed the presence before she even looked up. The air seemed to change, becoming heavier, charged with something she couldn't explain but instinctively recognized as hostility. And then she saw him, Tomas leaning against the doorframe, his arms crossed over his chest, his expression hard as stone. His face showed neither sadness nor concern, as one would expect from a husband standing next to his comatose wife. There was something different there, something dark, resentment, contempt, hatred. "You have the nerve to show up now?" His voice cut through the air like a cold knife. Clara swallowed hard. The force with which he said that made every bit of guilt she already felt even heavier. She looked at Valentina, fragile in that bed, connected to cables and machines, and then at the letters in her hands. She took a deep breath. "What happened to you?" Her voice came out low, but firm. Tomas laughed bitterly, a humorless, soulless laugh. "You disappear for 8 years, and now you want answers?" Clara's chest burned. She knew she had left. She knew that time had passed without her being there. But Valentina was there, between life and death. How dare he turn this into a blame game? "I'm not here for myself," she replied, holding back her tears. "I'm here for her." Tomas narrowed his eyes. Clara felt him studying her, analyzing every expression, every movement, as if looking for a reason to throw her out of there. "Valentina fell down the stairs," she said finally. "It was an accident." Clara blinked. An accident. The answer was too quick, too mechanical. She looked at her sister, the bruises scattered across her body, her face so pale, her heart beating fast. "How did it happen?" Tomas insisted, clenching his fists at his sides. "I already told you. It was an accident." The way she repeated it made something inside her stir. Neither fear nor guilt, just impatience. And then a doubt formed in Clara's mind. Was it an accident, or was it something much worse? She looked again at Valentina, then at the letters, and felt her stomach lurch. Something wasn't right, and the way Tomas looked at her, as if he wanted her to disappear, a certainty took hold of Clara. He knew something, and maybe that's why she never received those letters. The sound of the machines keeping Valentina alive seemed louder, more threatening, as if each beep was counting down the time she had left. Tomas took a step forward, and Clara felt her body tense. He was taller, stronger, and the way he looked at her conveyed more than anger. It was a warning. "You shouldn't be here," he said in a low voice full of contempt. Clara clutched the letters tighter. Her fingertips were white, but she wouldn't let go. "No, now I'm her sister," she replied, feeling the fury growing inside her. Tomas laughed dryly that turned her stomach. "Sister," he nodded his head, as if considering those words. "You abandoned Valentina. You disappeared." Clara felt the blow because he was right. She left. She left her sister behind, believing that somehow everything would be okay. But now Valentina was there, fragile, unconscious, as if the world were punishing her for all the time she spent pretending that the longing didn't hurt. Tomas took another step closer, his heart pounding hard. "Do you have any idea what she went through? All she suffered?" He narrowed his eyes. "No, of course not. You were busy living your life while I was here. I took care of her. I saw her cry every night. I held her hand when no one else did. Every word was a blow, but something didn't add up." Tomas talked about taking care of her, but his tone wasn't that of a man devastated by seeing his wife in that state. There was no love. There was no concern, only anger, and deep down, something else. Something Clara couldn't quite put her finger on, but which unsettled her. She looked at Valentina, and then at Tomas. "Did you really take care of her? Why is she like this?" His face hardened instantly, his jaw tightened, his eyes turned cold. "It was an accident," he repeated, as if that were the final word on the matter. But Clara no longer believed that, because Tomas was nervous, and because right there on the bedside table were the letters Valentina had written to her. Letters that never arrived, letters that someone had hidden, and Clara had a very strong feeling about who had done it. The hospital room felt smaller and smaller, the air heavy, charged with something Clara couldn't name. She felt every rapid beat of her heart, her trembling hands holding the letters, and she knew she had to go on. She knew that inside those yellowed pages was something Valentina tried to tell her, something that for some reason never reached her. She opened the second letter. The handwriting was the same, small and delicate, but something was different. The once firm strokes now looked uncertain, as if Valentina had written those words with trembling hands. Clara began to read silently. "Clara wanted so much to talk to you. At first I thought it was just work stress, the pressure of everyday life, but Tomas has changed. He's not the same." Clara's fingers clenched the paper tighter. Her stomach churned. "He's always so irritable, so impatient. Sometimes I feel like I have to tiptoe around my own house. When he gets angry, I see something in his eyes that scares me. I try not to think about it. I try to believe it's just a phase. But last night," Clara turned the page. her heart pounding, trying to hide it. Last night he grabbed my arm hard, something he had never done that before. He said I was overreacting, that I'm too sensitive, but it still hurts. Her eyes filled with tears. She looked at the bed, at Valentina, at the bruises on her pale arms. A chill ran down her spine. She turned another page. If anything happens to me, please take care of my daughter. Lucia. Lucia. Clara blinked, confused. She didn't know Valentina had a daughter. Her heart skipped a beat. She looked at Tomas, who was now looking away with his fists clenched. Something was very wrong. The letters weren't just nostalgic outpourings. They were a cry for help, one that never reached Clara, because someone made sure to hide them, and because they were there next to the bed waiting for her. And now her sister was between life and death, and there was a little girl who perhaps needed her more than ever. The phrase seemed to beat before Clara's eyes. If anything happens to me, please take care of my daughter Lucia. Her heart raced. A chill ran down her spine like a silent warning that something terrible was about to be revealed. She slowly looked up, feeling the weight of that discovery sink into her chest. Valentina had a daughter, and never told her. She mentioned it, or rather, she never had the chance to say it. Clara's gaze turned directly to Tomas, who was now avoiding her eyes, looking out the hospital window as if he could escape the questions that were about to be asked. "Who is Lucia?" Her voice came out shaky but firm. Tomas did not respond immediately. He took a deep breath as if he were carefully choosing each word. When he finally spoke, his voice came out slurred, laden with impatience. "My daughter. Our daughter." Clara swallowed hard. Valentina had a daughter, and no one told her. Clara looked back at the letter. The request for help seemed to have been written in a hurry, as if Valentina were scared, as if she knew that every word could be her last chance to make sure her daughter was safe. But safe from what? She didn't need to ask. Deep down, she already knew the answer. They had already begun to tell that story. Valentina's fear was there, hidden between the lines, in the pauses between sentences, in the full stops that seemed like silent screams. Tomas had changed. He wasn't the same anymore. Last night he grabbed me by the arm, and now Valentina was in a coma. And Lucia? Where was Lucia? Clara felt the air leave her lungs. A little girl alone with a man who was clearly hiding secrets. She turned to Tomas, feeling a chill run through her body. "Where is Lucia?" This time he looked at her, his dark, cold, impenetrable eyes. And then a crooked smile appeared at the corner of his lips. Small and insignificant to anyone but Clara. For Clara, that smile was a warning, and the certainty hit her like a punch in the stomach. Lucia was not safe, and Valentina knew it. She tried to warn him, tried to call for help, but they silenced her before she could be heard. Clara felt her fingers close around the letter. Before Tomas could respond, she heard a noise in the hallway, small, hurried footsteps, the sound of a child's shoe dragging across the waxed hospital floor. Clara turned toward the door, and then she saw her. Lucia, the little girl, had dark, straight hair, tied in two poorly made braids. Her delicate face showed something that Clara recognized immediately. It was the same look Valentina had when she was little, but there was something else, something that hurt Clara even more. Lucia did not look at her with the joy and spontaneity typical of a little girl. Her big brown eyes were full of curiosity and sadness. She held a small notebook against her chest, as if it were her greatest treasure, and then, in a low, hesitant voice, she asked, "Are you my mom's sister?" Clara's heart stopped for a moment. She felt a lump form in her throat. Lucia spoke as if she had been waiting for this moment for a long time, as if she knew who Clara was, but had never been allowed to ask. Clara slowly bent down to be at her height. "Yes, I am. My name is Clara." Lucia pressed the notebook against her chest even tighter. "Mom talked about you." A chill ran down Clara's spine. "She talked about you?" The girl nodded slightly, biting her lip as if she were thinking about whether or not she should say what came next, and then whispered just to Clara, "Yes, but only when Dad wasn't around." Clara's stomach sank. She glanced toward the door where Tomas stood with his arms crossed, watching the scene. Lucia didn't move toward him. She didn't run to hug him like a little girl would when she saw her dad. She just stood there quietly, holding that notebook as if it were a shield. Clara knew at that moment that the girl had much more to say, but not at that moment, not with Tomas present. She took a deep breath, trying to hold back the tears. "Lucia, can I see what's in that notebook?" The girl hesitated, looked around, then lowered her voice. "Only when we're alone." A chill ran through Clara. This was not just a little girl's notebook. It was a secret, and Lucia was afraid. The silence that followed Lucia's whisper seemed to grow heavier in the air. Clara felt tension take hold of her body, as if she were about to witness something she shouldn't. What could a 7-year-old girl who needed so much care be hiding? The answer came before Clara could ask. Tomas moved forward down the hallway and took his daughter's hand in a way that seemed casual but was not. Lucia trembled at the contact. It was a small, almost imperceptible movement, but it was there. A doubt, a silent fear. The little girl's small body shrank slightly, as if she were already used to being pulled away like that. But what made Clara's blood run cold was Tomas's gaze. A hard look, a warning look. The unspoken message was clear. Don't come near. His jaw was tense. The smirk Clara had seen before was gone. He said nothing, but he didn't need to. Lucia, on the other hand, looked back, her large dark eyes meeting Clara's for a split second before Tomas pulled her away, and Clara saw something there. It wasn't just fear. It was a plea for help. A plea that Valentina had already made in her letters. But this time, Clara would not ignore it. She watched the two of them walk away down the hallway, Tomas's footsteps echoing on the waxed floor as he led Lucia with him. The silence in the hospital felt colder after Tomas and Lucia disappeared. Down the hallway, Clara still felt the impact of that warning look, as if every cell in her body had understood what he meant. Stay out of it. But she wouldn't. Not this time, with the letters still firmly in her hands. Clara looked at Valentina, asleep, fragile, connected to those machines that seemed to be the only thing sustaining her life. Then the door to the room opened. "Mrs. Vasquez?" Clara turned and saw the doctor, a middle-aged man with a tired expression and attentive eyes, who looked at her with some concern. "I'm Dr. Emilio Ortega. I'm in charge of your sister's care." Clara took a deep breath, trying to prepare herself for what was to come. What happened to her? The doctor hesitated for a moment, as if choosing his words carefully. He was holding a folder with notes, but he wasn't looking at them. He was looking at Clara. "Your sister suffered a fall." Clara felt a chill down the stairs. Dr. Ortega nodded. "Yes, that's how her husband reported it when he called the ambulance." The way he said those words made Clara's stomach churn. He didn't need to say it. The doctor didn't believe Tomas's story. Clara moistened her lips. "But she'll wake up." The doctor's gaze softened, but his answer brought no relief. "We don't know. The impact was strong. In addition to the blow to the head, she has several fractures." He turned a few pages of the folder, some of which were already in the process of recovery. Clara blinked. How the doctor took a deep breath this time. He looked at his notes as if reading something difficult to say. "In his history, there are many injuries over the years." Clara's chest tightened. "He's saying he couldn't finish the sentence. It wasn't necessary." The doctor looked up. "Mrs. Vasquez, your sister has been here before." Clara felt a lump in her throat. "What?" Dr. Ortega turned a few more pages and continued. "Fractures in the wrists, in the ankles, extensive bruising, contusions in the ribs. Each time she came in, the reason was different." But Valentina's medical file stopped, and he looked directly at Clara, as if he expected her to understand what he was about to say. "These are not common injuries from domestic accidents." Clara's leg suddenly buckled. Valentina's words in the letters came back to her mind. "Tomas has changed. He's not the same. Last night he grabbed my arm tightly." Shock ran through Clara's body like a wave. The medical file was there. The history of injuries, hospital visits. And no one did anything, because Valentina never said anything, because she probably always went home and pretended everything was fine. The same cycle over and over until this time. This time there was almost no coming back. Clara felt the air leave her, and a thought took hold of her. What if Lucia was going through the same thing? She couldn't wait. She couldn't hesitate any longer. She looked at the doctor with eyes full of tears and a trembling voice. "If my sister can't speak, I'll speak for her." And in that moment, Clara knew what she had to do. She would call the police. Clara left Valentina's room with trembling legs and her heart pounding against her chest. Every word the doctor had said echoed in her head, like a belated warning, as if the truth had been there all along, and no one had been able to see it. How many times had Valentina needed help and not received it? Clara felt a lump forming in her throat. She closed her eyes for a second and tried to take a deep breath, but she was interrupted by a voice in the distance, a voice that made her blood run cold. "Doctor, I am very grateful for everything you are doing for my wife. I know your team is taking great care of her." Clara opened her eyes and saw Tomas in the hallway, shaking the doctor's hand, his expression full of forced gratitude. Then he turned to one of the nurses and took her hand too, squeezing it too hard to be friendly. "I know it's not easy to handle cases like this, but you are incredible." He smiled, but it wasn't the smile of a man devastated to see his wife between life and death. It was an empty, cold, calculating smile, and Clara understood in that instant that the smile was a mask. He was acting, manipulating everyone around him as if he were the victim of a tragedy. And worst of all, the people around him believed him. The nurse smiled back at him, nodding with an understanding look. "You've been very strong." Clara's stomach churned. Tomas was pretending to be the exemplary husband, the man who was taking care of his wife, who was holding back tears in front of the doctors, who was spending his nights by her bedside. But Clara knew the truth. Valentina didn't fall, and now Clara saw her in a different light. He wasn't just thanking the doctors. He was controlling the story. He wanted everyone to think it was an accident. He didn't want anyone to ask questions. Questions she wanted no one to suspect, and she was succeeding. Clara felt a knot of rage and helplessness grow inside her. How many times had Valentina tried to say something and been silenced with that same smile? But then, Tomas realized they were watching him. His eyes met Clara's, and for a second, his smile faltered. His friendly expression crumbled. For an instant, just an instant, but it was enough for Clara to see what was behind that mask: hatred. He knew that Clara was there to change the course of this story, and he would not allow it so easily. Clara felt her stomach churn. That doubt was already inside her. It had been there for a long time, growing slowly like a silent shadow that lengthened with each new piece of the puzzle. But now, after what she heard from the doctor, after seeing Tomas's empty smile, the question was complete. Did Valentina fall, or was she pushed? She took a deep breath, her heart racing, and looked toward the hospital hallway. Tomas was still talking to the doctors, dominating the situation like a maestro conducting an orchestra. Everything was calculated, everything was under control, but Clara was not. Beyond the performance, she remembered the letters. Valentina knew that something could happen to her, and now she was in a coma. She returned to the room and closed the door, as if she needed a moment to breathe. But when she looked at Valentina, all her determination returned. She approached slowly, sitting down next to the bed and taking her sister's cold hand in hers. It was the same girl who had once held her hand when they were afraid of the dark, the same sister who had stayed up late with her when they were children, the same person she had promised never to abandon. And now Valentina was there, motionless, silent, trapped inside an injured body. Clara felt her eyes burn. "You tried to warn me, didn't you?" Her voice came out low and trembling, "But I wasn't here to hear you." She closed her eyes tightly, but now she was there, and she wasn't going to leave. A thought crossed her mind. If Valentina knew that something bad could happen, maybe someone else knew too. Clara felt a tension in the air as soon as she heard footsteps in the hallway. Then Valentina's bedroom door opened, and there they were, her parents, Mr. Hector and Mrs. Isabel Vasquez. Clara hadn't seen them in years, and the moment her eyes met theirs, everything came flooding back. Her childhood in a house where silence always spoke louder, the way problems were swept under the rug, as if ignoring them would make them disappear. The memory of the day Clara left, her father's disappointed gaze, her mother's dejected expression never stopped her, but they never asked her to stay either. And now they were there, but they didn't look at her directly. It was her mother who spoke first. in a low, tired voice. "Clara, my daughter." They hugged deeply. Her mother approached the bed, taking Valentina's hand carefully, as if any touch could break it. She held back her tears. "My girl." Clara felt a lump in her throat. They were really suffering, but not in the same way she was. Not with the same anger. "Mom, do you really believe that?" Her father looked away. What else could it have been? Clara took a step forward, trying to contain her frustration that her father barely looked at her, even after so many years. "Valentina tried to talk to me for years. She wrote letters asking for help. She knew something was going to happen." Her mother looked at her uncomfortably, but said nothing. Her father took a deep breath, as if it were a burden he didn't want to carry, then looked Clara in the eyes for the first time in years. "Don't cause trouble." Clara felt the ground disappear. For a moment, trouble. Her voice broke. "My sister is in a coma, and you're worried about not causing trouble?" The mother looked away. This isn't the time for this. But Clara felt it. She felt what was happening there. The same thing that had happened her whole life. The silence. The fear of facing the truth. The refusal to see what was right in front of them. She stood up, her heart pounding in her chest. "The doctor told me about her injuries. Valentina had been here many times before." Her father crossed his arms, and she never said anything. Clara let out a dry, humorless laugh, because she knew no one wanted to listen. Mrs. Isabel closed her eyes tightly, as if she wanted to push that truth away. "Tomas told us it was an accident." Clara felt the rage growing inside her. "Tomas is lying." The silence in the room was absolute. Clara's parents looked at each other. There was something there, an ancient fear, a truth they already knew, and that's when she understood. They knew. Maybe not everything, maybe not the details, but they knew enough to choose not to see. She felt tears burning in her eyes. Are they really going to pretend they don't see? Her mother finally looked at her, and Clara saw the weight in those eyes, the guilt, the helplessness, and worst of all, the resignation. "There's nothing we can do, Clara." She felt her stomach sink. She looked at Valentina, the sister who always wanted to be heard, and then she looked at her parents, who always chose silence. But Clara was not like them. She was not going to be silent. She held the letters tightly, and then said the only thing she needed to say. "If you are not going to do anything, I will." The clock in the hospital read 3 a.m., but for Clara, time seemed to stand still. The silence of the early morning made everything feel heavier, denser. Only the sound of the heart monitor broke the stillness of the room. She sat there next to her sister, holding her cold, pale hand. She didn't have the strength to leave. She couldn't. Her head was pounding with everything she had discovered that day. The letters, the bruises, the doubt in the doctor's voice when he talked about the injuries, the look of fear in Lucia's eyes, Tomas's fake smile, and above all, the deafening silence of her parents. She looked at Valentina. Her face now looked so fragile, so different from the girl full of life that Clara remembered. Her skin was too pale, her lips dry, her chest rising and falling irregularly, as if at any moment the air could simply stop coming in. Clara squeezed her hand tighter. "Valentina, forgive me," she whispered, feeling the tears burn in her eyes. She should have come back sooner. She took a deep breath, trying to hold back her tears. She knew her sister couldn't hear her, but at the same time she felt that somehow Valentina was there. Clara closed her eyes for a moment and tried to remember the last time she heard her voice. Not in the hospital, not through letters, but in real life. 8 years ago, a quick phone call where Valentina sounded sad, but tried to hide it. "How are you?" "I'm fine, Clara." "And you?" She lied, and Clara believed her. Now looking at her unconscious sister, a thought came to her mind like a cruel whisper. If I had come back sooner, none of this would have happened. A cold breeze swept through the room. Clara shivered, feeling a chill. Her sister unconscious, a thought came to her mind like a cruel whisper. If she had come back sooner, none of this would have happened. A cold breeze swept through the room. Clara shivered, feeling a chill run through her skin. Her gaze returned to Valentina. Was it just her imagination, or did her sister's fingers move slightly? Clara held her breath. Valentina's chest continued to rise and fall slowly. Her eyes closed, her lips motionless. But Clara felt a small movement, as if Valentina wanted to speak. She wanted to say something. Clara's heart raced. She leaned closer, holding her hand tightly. "I'm here, Valentina. Say something. Anything." But nothing happened. There was no other reaction. Clara sighed in frustration. Maybe it was just her imagination, but as she looked at her sister's fragile face, she felt something inside her. A certainty. Valentina was trying to fight, but she needed help to make it. Dawn brought a pale light to the hospital, but nothing seemed truly new or hopeful. The weight of the night remained on Clara, as if she had aged years in a few hours. She hadn't slept. She couldn't. Every sound from Valentina's heart monitor was a reminder that her sister was fighting for her life, and that out there, the man who put her there was still free. Clara left the room to get some air, but she had barely taken 2 steps down the hall. She felt a slight tug on her blouse. Her heart raced. Lucia was there. The girl looked around nervously, as if she were afraid someone would see them. Her little eyes, so similar to her mother's, were dark with worry. Her small body seemed even smaller in that cold hospital. "What's wrong, sweetie?" Clara asked, crouching down to her level. Lucia bit her lip, hugging her notebook to her chest. After a few seconds of hesitation, she pulled Clara into a corner of the hallway, away from the gaze of the doctors and nurses. Clara felt a knot in her stomach. The girl took a deep breath and asked in a low voice, "Are you going to take me with you?" Clara gasped. "What?" Lucia clutched her notebook even tighter, as if it were her only protection. Her voice came out almost as a whisper, laden with a fear that no child should ever feel. "My mom said we were going to be happy." Clara's heart raced. Valentina had a plan to escape. Clara swallowed hard. "Lucia, did your mom say when you were going to leave?" The girl looked down and slowly shook her head. "She just said it was going to be soon." Clara closed her eyes. For a moment, her stomach churned. Valentina tried to escape, but something went wrong. Or worse, someone stopped her. Lucia pulled Clara again, her little eyes filled urgency. "Are you going to take me?" Clara felt her throat tighten. She wanted to say yes. She wanted to say she would take Lucia in her arms and run away, taking her to a place where Tomas could never find them. But it was too dangerous. She couldn't act without thinking. Clara took a deep breath, holding her niece's small hands in hers. "I promise I'll take care of you." Lucia was silent for a moment, then looked around as if to check that they were really alone. Then she took a step closer and whispered something that made Clara's blood run cold. "Mommy wanted to leave, but he wouldn't let her." Clara's world seemed to spin. She already knew it deep down. She already knew. But hearing those words come out of Lucia's mouth made the truth even more cruel. "Who?" Lucia, the little girl, bit her lip and hesitated. Her small body was tense, as if she was afraid to say something she shouldn't. Clara held her hands firmly but lovingly. "You can trust me, sweetheart. I promise." Lucia looked around again. The fear in her eyes was something no child should have to bear. Then she finally answered, "Dad." Clara's stomach sank. Lucia looked down and continued, her voice lower than ever. "They fought a lot. Mom cried sometimes. When I woke up at night, I heard her tell him that she didn't want to be there anymore, that we were going to leave." Clara felt a chill run down her spine. "And what did your dad say?" Lucia squeezed her notebook tighter, her eyes filling with tears. "He said that Mom had no choice." The words pierced Clara's chest like knives. She closed her eyes for a second, trying to process it all. Valentina knew she had to escape, but Tomas wouldn't let her, and now she was in a coma. Clara looked at Lucia, who was now sobbing quietly as if trying to hold back her tears. She was so small, so fragile, but at the same time she carried an enormous truth within her. Lucia knew the answer Clara was looking for, and perhaps it was the only proof Clara had to save Valentina and herself. Now it was clear to her. Tomas not only lied, he prevented Valentina from escaping, and Valentina knew that something could happen to her, which is why she wrote the letters, which is why asked Clara to take care of Lucia. Now she was standing in front of her sister's daughter, a small, frightened girl asking for help without saying the exact words. Lucia knew more than anyone could imagine, and her. She wanted to take Lucia and run, to get her out of that hell before it was too late, but she couldn't. Not without proof. Tomas was in control of the situation. He was the father. If she tried to take her away by force, he could accuse her of kidnapping. He could say that Clara was crazy, that she just wanted to cause trouble, and who would believe her? The doctors were already falling for Tomas's act. Her parents were already convinced that there was nothing to be done. The police, perhaps not, without real proof. And if Clara did something wrong, Lucia would pay the price. The girl would remain alone with that man, and Valentina might never wake up to protect her. Clara closed her eyes, trying to hold back the tears. She felt she was about to lose Lucia in the same way she had lost Valentina. If she remained silent, if she pretended that nothing was happening, Lucia would suffer the same fate as her mother. She would live in a house full of fear, shaped by the shadow of a man who controlled everything around her. But if Clara acted without thinking, she could lose any chance of saving her. It was an impossible choice: confront Tomas and risk losing Lucia, or remain silent and abandon her, as she had done with Valentina. A lump formed in her throat. Lucia looked at her expectantly, waiting for an answer, waiting for an adult to finally do something. Clara closed her eyes and took a deep breath. She wasn't going to run away again, but this time she had to be careful. If Tomas played with manipulation and lies, she would learn to play too. She looked at Lucia, took her small hands, and squeezed them firmly. "Trust me." Lucia hesitated for a moment, but then nodded. Clara forced a smile to reassure her, even though fear burned in her chest. "I'm going to get you out of here." She knew she had to act fast. She had to find something that proved the truth before it was too late. That's why that night, Clara did something she never imagined she would do. She went to Valentina's house, the place where her sister had lived all those years, the place where she had perhaps suffered in silence. Her hands trembled as she turned the key in the lock. The silence inside the house was disturbing. There were no voices, no children's laughter, just a suffocating emptiness. Every room seemed to hide secrets. The photos on the wall showed a perfect family: Tomas, Valentina, and Lucia, smiling as if everything were fine, as if that house didn't hide so much fear. Clara knew she had to look for something inside that house. She could tell what Valentina never had the courage to say. She started with the closets, then checked the closet under the bed. Nothing. But when she opened the desk drawer in her sister's room, she felt a chill. There was a small blue notebook hidden at the bottom, a diary. Clara's heart raced. Valentina never had a diary, or at least she never told anyone. She took the notebook with trembling hands and turned the pages. Her sister's delicate handwriting was there, but the tone of the words made a lump to form in her throat. Those pages weren't just a diary, they were a testimony of pain. The first pages talked about simple things, little stories from everyday life, moments with Lucia, happy memories. But as Clara turned the pages, she noticed the change. The words became shorter, more tense. And then she found it. "I try to pretend that everything is fine, but I'm scared." Clara's stomach churned. Scared for me, scared for Lucia. Her hands began to sweat. At first, I thought Tomas was just stressed. He would apologize, then say it wouldn't happen again, but it always happens again. He doesn't need to yell. The way he looks at me when he's angry already makes me want to disappear. Clara held her breath. There was the proof of everything Valentina had been through. She kept reading. "Last night, Lucia asked me why I was crying. I lied and told her everything was fine, but she always knows. I wanted to run away, but he told me I had no choice, that if I tried, he would take Lucia away from me, that no one would believe me." The diary slipped from Clara's hands. Tomas threatened to take Lucia away from her. That explained everything: the fear, the doubt, the letters she never sent. She tried to escape, but he stopped her, and now Valentina was trapped inside her own body, and Lucia was still at his mercy. Clara picked up the diary from the floor and held it tightly. That diary was more than words. It was Valentina's voice, and this time Clara would make sure everyone heard her. She read and reread every sentence, feeling her blood boil, the fear, the anguish, the failed attempt to escape. Tomas's threats. It was all there now. He could no longer hide. Clara knew she had to be cautious, but the rage inside her wouldn't let her wait another second longer. She didn't just want to confront him. She wanted him to know that his time was running out. When she arrived at the hospital that night, she found Tomas exactly where she expected him to be, sitting comfortably in the hallway drinking coffee, as if he were just another devoted husband with his wife in a coma. He looked up as soon as he saw her. Clara approached slowly, feeling her heart beat fast. She was no longer afraid when she stopped in front of him. Tomas, ready for another of his games. But Clara wasted no time. "I know what you did." His smile didn't disappear. On the contrary, it grew even bigger. He let out a low, almost mocking laugh and shook his head. "What am I supposed to have done?" Clara felt her chest burn. She wanted to scream. She wanted to push him against the wall and force him to admit everything. But she couldn't lose control. She took a deep breath, keeping her voice steady. "Do you have any proof?" He continued, leaning back in defiance. Clara looked him straight in the eye, clutching the diary tightly. "Valentina has them." His smile faltered for a moment, a tiny, almost imperceptible second. But Clara saw it. It was enough to know that he was afraid, but as always, he quickly regained his composure. He laughed again, running his hands through his hair as if it were all a big joke. "You think a diary means anything?" he scoffed. Words written by a deranged woman, an ungrateful wife who never knew how to appreciate what she had. Clara felt her blood boil, but she didn't back down. "Laugh now, Tomas, but I'm going to see this through to the end. I'm going to show these words to the police. I'm going to expose everything you did." He stood up slowly. Now he wasn't laughing. His gaze was different, dark and somber. "You have no idea who you're dealing with." Clara felt a chill, but she didn't back down. She clutched the diary tighter. "And you have no idea what I'm capable of doing to protect my sister." The two stared at each other for a long time. This time, there were no more masks. Tomas knew that Clara was a threat, and Clara knew that he was willing to do anything to protect himself. Clara left the hospital, feeling the weight of Tomas's gaze on her. She didn't need to turn around to know that he was watching her. She knew that now he was on alert, that he knew she wasn't going to back down, but she also knew that he had something Clara didn't yet have: control of the situation. She was walking quickly through the parking lot when she heard a familiar voice calling her. "Clara, wait!" Her mother approached, clutching her purse tightly, as if she needed to hold on to something to gather the courage to speak. Her eyes were red, the wrinkles on her face even more pronounced by the weight of the situation. Clara stood her ground, waiting for what she already imagined would come. "Daughter, please leave it at that." Anger grew inside Clara like fire on gunpowder. "What, Doña Isabel?" She took a deep breath, looking away. "We can't fight this battle. We have no proof of anything." Clara felt a lump in her throat. "Mom, for God's sake, the proof is right in front of you. Valentina is in a coma. Lucia is terrified. I found a diary where she clearly says she was afraid of him. But a diary isn't enough to accuse someone of something so serious. Then we'll wait for him to kill my sister." Her mother opened her eyes in surprise, as if Clara had just said something unthinkable, but then she lowered her head in silence. It was at that moment that Clara understood. Her mother already knew, maybe not everything, maybe not the darkest details, but she knew enough. She always knew, but she chose silence. She chose fear. "You don't understand," her mother began, her voice almost pleading. "Men like him always win. He has money. He has influence. She can turn this against you. She can say you're making it all up. She can even convince a judge that you want to take Lucia away from her." Clara felt her chest tighten. "I'm not going to stand by and watch this happen." Her mother took her hands, holding her. "I know you want to protect your sister, but daughter, there is no justice for women like Valentina." Clara pulled her hands back, feeling her eyes fill with tears. That's why she never asked for help, right? Because she knew no one would listen to her. Doña Isabel didn't respond. She stood there with her head down, not brave enough to look at her. Clara took a step back, feeling a mixture of pain and disappointment. "I'm not like you. I'm not going to shut up without expecting anything else." She turned around and walked away to the hotel where she was staying. It was a blur. Clara didn't remember driving. She didn't remember going up to her room. But when she realized it, she was sitting on the edge of the bed with Valentina's diary in her hands, her fingers running through the crumpled pages. But this time, her eyes couldn't focus on the words. Her head was pounding with everything that was happening. She was alone. Her parents had given up. The doctors were blinded by Tomas's theatrics. And now, if she reported him without concrete evidence, she could lose Lucia forever. Tomas could say that Clara was unstable, that she was trying to steal his daughter, that she wanted to take custody of the girl for no reason. He had money, he had influence, and worst of all, he had time on his side. If Clara made a mistake, he would become untouchable. Despair overwhelmed her. What if he disappeared with Lucia? What if he moved out of town? What if he convinced the courts that Clara was a danger to the girl? What if Valentina never woke up? The thought oppressed her chest. She couldn't fail. She couldn't lose this fight, but she didn't know how to win either. She pressed the diary against her chest and closed her eyes, trying to hold back the tears. For the first time since she arrived to Houston, she had felt afraid that she might not be able to save Lucia, and that thought was tearing her apart inside. Clara knew she couldn't face Tomas alone. Fear tried to whisper to her that he was too powerful, that no one would believe her, that the system always protected men like him, but she refused to accept that. If Valentina had spent years trying to escape and had been silenced, Clara would be her voice now. That's why the next morning, after another sleepless night, she took the diary, filled her lungs with courage, and drove to a lawyer's office. The place was simple but welcoming. Clara hoped that meant the woman who would see her wasn't the type to sell herself to anyone with money. A friendly receptionist took her to a small room where, minutes later, a middle-aged woman with attentive eyes and a serious expression entered and introduced herself. "My name is Laura Mendez. How can I help you?" Clara wasted no time. She placed Valentina's diary on the table and looked the lawyer straight in the eye. "I need to get my niece out of her father's house before it's too late." Laura frowned and opened the diary carefully. "Explain to me exactly what is going on." Clara told her everything, from the unexpected call from the hospital to the look of fear in Lucia's eyes. She talked about the injuries that the doctors were reluctant to explain, the letters that never arrived, the threats Valentina wrote, Tomas's fake smile, and the fear in her own mother's eyes when she said that men like him always won. When she finished, she felt a weight lift from her chest, but the anguish remained. Laura took a deep breath and skimmed through a few pages of the diary before looking up at Clara. If Valentina wrote this, it could be evidence of abuse. Clara leaned forward, her heart pounding. "That means we can do something." Laura closed the diary and folded her hands on the table. "Yes, but we have to act carefully. The diary is evidence, but on its own, it may not be enough to get her out." With her heart pounding, "That means we can do something." Laura closed the diary and folded her hands on the table. "Yes, but we have to act carefully. The diary is evidence, but on its own, it may not be enough to get custody of Lucia or to prove that Tomas was responsible for what happened to your sister." Clara felt her stomach sink. "Then what do I do?" Laura took a notepad and began to write. "First, we need to gather more evidence. Valentina's medical records are a good start. If we can prove that there was a history of abuse, we can argue that Lucia is at risk. We also need Lucia's own testimony, but that has to be done the right way, with a forensic psychologist, so that her testimony is valid." Clara nodded, feeling a mixture of hope and despair. "And Tomas can prevent that." Laura looked at her seriously. "He'll try. Men like him always try. But if we do this right, we'll catch him where it hurts most, in the law." Clara felt a wave of emotion wash over her body. For the first time, she felt that there might be a real chance to save Lucia. Laura handed her her card. "From now on, I'm your lawyer, but I need you to be strong, because this fight won't be easy." Clara held the card tightly and took a deep breath. "I won't stop until my sister gets justice." She left the office knowing that the battle was just beginning, but now she was no longer alone. Clara knew she didn't have much time. After her conversation with Laura, she felt that she was finally doing something real to save Lucia, but she also knew that as soon as Tomas found out, he would try to stop her. He wouldn't let control slip from his hands without a fight, and it didn't take long for that to happen. It was already past 8 p.m. when Clara left the hospital after spending a few hours with Valentina. Her sister remained motionless, but something inside her told her that somehow Valentina felt her presence every time she took her hand. She felt that same knot in her chest, that same feeling that Valentina was still there trying to fight. She walked through the empty parking lot, the silence of the night becoming heavier, the icy wind making her skin crawl. But it was another kind of cold that made her body tense up. A shadow moved next to her car. Clara stopped, her heart racing. She knew who it was before she even saw him. Tomas emerged from the shadows calmly, as if he had all the time in the world. He had a cigarette between his fingers and a half smile on his lips, but his eyes were hard, without a trace of amusement. "You've been busy." Clara didn't answer. Her body tensed, but she refused to show fear. He threw the cigarette on the ground and slowly stepped on it. "Talking to lawyers about my daughter as if she were yours." Clara's blood ran cold. He knew. "You're not going to take my daughter away from me this time." His voice was low, almost a whisper, but laden with menace. Clara took a deep breath, feeling her hands tremble, but instead of backing away, she took a step forward. "I don't need to take anything away from you, Tomas. You're just going to lose her." His smile disappeared. "You think you stand a chance against me? You think a diary full of nonsense and some random lawyer are going to change anything?" Clara narrowed her eyes, forcing herself not to look away. "I think you're afraid." For a second, something flashed in his eyes. Anger. He hated losing control. Tomas took another step closer. "You don't understand, do you? Lucia is my daughter, and no one is going to believe you. I'm a loving father, a family man. You're just the unstable sister who abandoned Valentina years ago, and now wants to play the heroine." Those words hurt her, because they were a low blow, because it was what she feared most. Tomas smiled again. "Go back to your life, Clara, before it's too late." He walked past her, leaving behind the smell of cigarettes and cheap perfume. Clara felt her breath stop, her eyes burn, but she didn't turn around. She just stood there, motionless, feeling the weight of his words. Clara arrived at the hospital feeling her body still tense after her encounter with Tomas. The smell of cigarettes still seemed to cling to her skin, and his words echoed in her mind like a cruel sentence. "You're not going to take my daughter away from me." It wasn't just a threat. He believed it because men like him always believe they will never be punished, that they will always be in control. But Clara was not willing to back down. Not now. She walked quickly through the hallways, her heart pounding. She just wanted to see Valentina. She just wanted to sit by her side and hold her hand, promising her she wouldn't give up. But as soon as she turned the corner, she sensed something was wrong. The doctors were gathered outside the room, their expressions tense, whispering hurriedly among themselves. Clara's heart raced. What happened? Her voice came out shaky, but no one answered right away. One of the doctors looked at her cautiously, hesitating before saying anything. Her sister was critical, and Clara's stomach sank. "What does that mean?" The doctor sighed, choosing his words carefully. Her condition worsened. Her blood pressure dropped dramatically. Her vital signs became unstable. "We had to intervene quickly to stabilize her, but she's fine now." This time, the doctor didn't respond immediately, and Clara knew it. She felt the ground disappear beneath her feet. "What are you trying to tell me?" The doctor took a deep breath. "Valentina has slipped into a deep coma." Clara felt the world spinning. Her chest hurt. Her eyes burned. "No, her brain is under a lot of stress. Her chances of recovery have decreased. There is a possibility that she may never wake up." Those words were like a blow to the chest. The air disappeared from her lungs. The hospital hallway seemed to spin around her. She felt her legs give way, and only realized she was falling to the floor when a nurse ran to catch her. "Take me to her, please." Her eyes were filled with tears. When she entered the room, Valentina was there, but she seemed even more distant, even more fragile. The machines flashed. The cables seemed endless, and every beep from the heart monitor sounded like a cruel reminder that she was trapped there, unable to fight for herself. Clara fell to her knees beside the bed and took her hand tightly. "Please don't do this to me." Her voice broke. "I haven't fixed things yet. I haven't asked for your forgiveness properly." A tear fell onto the white sheets. "You can't leave me now, Valentina. You can't." But her sister didn't respond, and for the first time, Clara felt that maybe she was losing this battle. Clara's body felt heavy, as if every cell in her body was exhausted from fighting after Valentina's condition worsened. Hope seemed to slip through her fingers, and for the first time, real fear took hold of her. What if her sister never woke up? What if she could never tell her own story? She knew she couldn't afford to falter now, but the last few days had been cruel. Tomas was one step ahead, and she felt it in every distrustful glance she received. When she entered the hospital that morning, she noticed the nurses whispering among themselves before looking at her. The doctor, who had previously seemed understanding, now spoke more coldly. Valentina's parents, who were already distant, seemed even more doubtful when talking to Clara. She sensed the danger even before hearing the words. The first person to warn her was Laura, her lawyer. When Clara arrived at the office, she found the woman looking serious, cell phone in hand, and an expression of contained irritation on her face. "We need to talk," Laura said bluntly. Clara sat down, feeling her stomach churn. "What happened?" Laura ran her hand through her hair and sighed before beginning. "Tomas has started spreading a new version of the story. He's telling anyone who will listen that you only came back for Valentina's money, that you want control of her inheritance." Clara's eyes widened in surprise. "What is he saying? That you were always selfish? That you abandoned your sister by choice? And now you want to play the heroine to look like a good person?" Clara felt a blind rage take hold of her. "And people are believing it." Laura crossed her arms seriously. "People like stories. It's Clara, and he's giving a convenient version. You left. That's a fact. He's using that against you." Clara felt her chest tighten. She knew the past was not in her favor. She left Valentina behind. As much as she had her reasons, as much as she regretted it, it was true. And Tomas was twisting that truth to make it seem like she never had ever cared. "This could affect the process," she asked in a lower voice than she would have liked. He nodded. "If he can convince a judge that you are acting out of financial interest, your credibility could be destroyed. He could say that you are manipulating Lucia, that you are trying to turn her against her father, out of ambition." Clara felt a lump in her throat. "But I just want to protect my niece." Laura looked at her seriously. "I know, but we have to prove it." Clara clenched her fists. Tomas wasn't just trying to get rid of her. He was rewriting history. He was erasing every pain Valentina suffered, every fear Lucia felt, every truth Clara tried to reveal. He wanted everyone to believe that he was the perfect man, and that she was the villain of the story. The weight of Tomas's lie was suffocating Clara. He was gaining ground by manipulating the story to his favor, erasing the traces of everything he did. But in the midst of that chaos, Clara still had one certainty. Lucia knew the truth. It was late afternoon when Clara returned to the hospital. After her conversation with Laura, she felt even more exhausted, but she couldn't show it. She had to be strong. She had to keep going. However, as soon as she entered Valentina's room and saw her sister's condition, something inside her broke. Valentina's face was even paler, strands of hair scattered on the pillow, her chest rising and falling slowly with the help of the machines. With each passing day, hope diminished, and now, with Tomas spreading his lies, Clara felt that everything was falling apart. She sat down next to her sister and took her hand. "Tell me what to do, Valentina. Give me a sign." The tears came. Unable to hold them back, the despair she had tried to drown invaded her. Everything seemed lost. It was then that she felt a soft touch on her other hand, small and fragile. Clara looked up and saw Lucia there beside her. The girl was watching her with frightened eyes, but also with something that Clara couldn't immediately identify. Guilt, fear. Lucia took a deep breath. Before she spoke, she said, "Mommy was taking me away." Clara froze. "What?" Lucia looked at Valentina on the bed and then lowered her head. "They fought. Mommy told me to hide, but I saw everything." The air disappeared from Clara's lungs. Lucia squeezed her hand tighter, her small voice laden with a weight that no child should carry. He grabbed her arm. Mom fell down the stairs. Clara felt a chill run through her body. She already knew that Tomas was responsible. She already knew that Valentina would never have fallen on her own, but hearing it from Lucia's mouth, seeing the tears in her eyes, feeling the fear in her voice, made it even more real. Lucia sobbed, pressing her lips together. "Dad said it was an accident. He said that if I told anyone, they would take me away, that they would give me up for adoption, that Mom would be angry with me. Clara's chest tightened like never before. Lucia didn't just see. Everything was being silenced by fear. Clara gently took the girl's face in her hands, forcing her to look her. Look at me. This wasn't your fault. None of this. You didn't do anything wrong. Lucia began to cry silently, her little shoulders shaking. But he said he lied. Clara wiped her tears. I swear, Lucia, no one is going to take you away. You're not alone. Lucia took a deep breath, trying to hold back her tears. Lucia's testimony echoed in Clara's mind, like a cry muffled by time. Now there were no more doubts. Tomas pushed Valentina. He lied. He manipulated everything. But above all, he made Lucia believe that she couldn't tell the truth, that she would be punished if she spoke. Clara knew that feeling angry wasn't enough. She needed proof, irrefutable proof. She drove to Laura's office, her hands sweating on the steering wheel. As soon as she entered, she found the lawyer with a different expression. There was something in her eyes, a sparkle of someone who had discovered something big. Big. I got it. Laura held up an envelope with several sheets of paper. Clara approached quickly. Did you get it? Laura opened the papers on the table. All the old medical records. Valentina had been in the hospital several times in recent years. Clara's stomach sank. Laura continued turning the pages. Fractures, extensive bruises, unexplained injuries, and most importantly, repeated patterns of injuries. On more than one occasion, she said she had fallen down the stairs. Clara ran her hands through her hair, feeling a mixture of rage and despair. My God. Laura looked at her seriously. And there's more. I managed to contact an old neighbor of Valentina's. She said she heard screams on several nights, but never reported it because Valentina always showed up the next day, saying everything was fine. Clara closed her eyes, feeling her indignation grow. He was destroying her little by little, and no one did anything. Laura crossed her arms, watching Clara cautiously. Lucia's testimony and these records may be enough to open a formal investigation. Clara's eyes widened. Are you saying that? Laura nodded. I'm saying that now we have enough to call the police. Clara's heart raced. Then let's do it. The sound of the siren cutting through the air was the only thing Tomas heard before he saw the police appear at his door. Clara was there. Lucia was at her side, holding her hand tightly, and this time, Tomas knew that something had changed. He advanced toward Clara, his eyes shining with fury. What did you do? She kept her gaze steady. What you did, Tomas? He laughed nervously, looking at the police as if it were all a big joke. This is ridiculous. I am a loving father, a good man. She is trying to take my daughter away from me. One of the police officers approached. Mr. Tomas, you are not being arrested, but we need you to come with us to make a statement. The fury in his eyes grew. He took a step forward, closing the distance between him and Clara. Do you think you've won anything? Clara didn't back down. I know I've won. The police officers held him by the arms when he tried to move forward. You'll never prove anything, he argued, but his voice began to crack. You have nothing on me. Clara held Valentina's diary in her hands and squeezed. Yes, and now Lucia, too. He turned to the police officers with a serious tone. If I'm not being arrested, you can't do this to me. I'll go, but in my own car. I'm not a criminal, without a warrant, without the use of force. That night, while Clara and Laura were discussing the next steps in the process, the phone rang. It was an unknown number. Her heart raced. Something was wrong. Mrs. Vasquez, the voice on the other end was that of a police officer. We need you to come to the hospital now. Clara felt a chill. What happened? Tomas didn't show up to testify today. We tried to locate him, but a few minutes ago we received a report that he was seen leaving the hospital with Lucia. Clara felt the ground disappear beneath her. The police officer continued in a firm voice. He fled with the girl, but we're after him. Fear overwhelmed her. She knew Tomas was dangerous, but she never thought he would have the courage to flee with Lucia. The next few minutes were a blur. Clara drove to the hospital with her heart pounding in her chest, her hands trembling on the steering wheel. What was she going to do? He would try to disappear with the girl. He would cross the border, and if they never found Lucia again. When she arrived, the red lights of the patrol car were flashing at the entrance. Clara ran out of the car, the cold air hitting her face. One of the policemen approached her. We managed to intercept him. Clara almost collapsed with relief, and Lucia is fine, but scared. Her body relaxed from the tension. She looked for the girl until she found her curled up in the arms of a nurse. Lucia was looking at the floor, her little face pale, her eyes red from crying so much. Clara ran to her. Little Lucia looked up. As soon as she saw Clara, she threw herself into her arms. Clara held her tightly, feeling the tears fall before she could stop them. "I was scared," whispered the girl. Clara kissed her head. "It's over, my love. He'll never hurt you again." The image of Tomas in handcuffs was something Clara never imagined she would see. But there he was, sitting in the back of the patrol car, his face full of anger and despair. The police read the charges against him: domestic violence, attempted murder. He shouted that he was innocent, that it was a mistake, that they were being manipulated, but no one listened. Clara took Lucia's hand as they watched the patrol car drive away. Charges against him: abuse, domestic violence, attempted murder. He shouted that he was innocent, that it was a mistake, that they were being manipulated, but no one listened to him. Clara took Lucia's hand as they watched the patrol car drive away. "Is he coming back?" the girl asked in a low voice. Clara crouched down to her level and held her small shoulders. "Never again." Lucia looked at her for a few seconds and then hugged her. In the days that followed, Valentina's case became official. The medical records, Lucia's testimony, and the diary were enough to prevent Tomas from being released on bail. He would remain in prison until the trial. Lucia was taken to her grandparents' house, while Clara and Laura took legal steps to ensure that Tomas would never come near her again. But despite the feeling of victory, Clara felt that something was missing. That night, she returned to the hospital as she did every day and sat down next to Valentina's bed. "We did it, Valentina. He can't hurt you anymore. Lucia is safe." She took her sister's hand and squeezed it gently. "But you still have to come back. We need you." Tears rolled silently down her cheeks. "Please give me a sign that you can hear me. Anything." The room remained silent. Clara closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and rested her forehead on her hands, which were intertwined with her sister's. "I miss you so much." And then she felt something. A movement, a slight tremor in Valentina's fingers. Clara opened her eyes, her heart racing. "Valentina." The silence continued. Maybe she had imagined it. But then the fingers moved again. Clara felt her chest fill with emotion. "My God, Valentina, can you hear me?" There was no answer, but she didn't need one. She had seen it. The following days were full of tension and hope. The whole hospital began to follow the case. Small signs began to appear. First, the fingers moving more often, then a slight frown. Her breathing began to change, becoming stronger, more conscious. The doctors explained that her brain activity was increasing, that perhaps it was only a matter of time, but Clara already knew. Valentina was fighting to come back. And then it happened. Clara was sitting next to her sister when she felt a faint squeeze on her hand. Her heart raced, and her eyes widened. "Valentina." The silence lasted a moment, but then with great difficulty, her lips dry and her voice almost non-existent, Valentina whispered, "Lucia." It was just one word, but for Clara, it was the greatest miracle of her life. The hospital room had never seemed so small. The smell of medicine and the sound of the machines were still there, but now everything felt different. There was life in that space. There was hope. Valentina was still weak, still struggling to keep her eyes open, but little by little she was regaining consciousness. Her voice was low and her movements slow, but none of that mattered. She was there, and Lucia knew it. The girl entered the room holding Clara's hand, but as soon as she saw her mother awake, she let go of everything and ran to her. "Mommy!" Clara tried to stop her, but Lucia was already by the bed, holding her mother's weak hand with her little fingers. Her eyes were full of tears, but this time it was a different kind of crying. It was joy. It was relief. "Mom, I knew you were coming back." Valentina blinked slowly, as if trying to process it all, and with effort raised her other hand to her daughter's hair. Her voice came out weak. "But Clara, my love, Lucia sobbed and leaned over, resting her forehead on her mother's hand. "I missed you so much." It was at that moment that Clara realized Lucia no longer had to be afraid. She was no longer alone. Now she had the family she was left. Clara watched the scene with eyes full of tears, feeling an emotion she had never felt before. All those years, she had carried a weight on her chest, a guilt that consumed her. She had left Valentina behind, but now, looking at her sister, seeing her alive, touching Lucia, struggling to speak, Clara felt something different. Valentina was there. She had survived, and Clara, despite everything, had been by her side when it mattered most. She approached, unable to hold back her tears. She took her sister's hand. "You're back." Valentina turned her eyes toward her, weak but conscious, and then with a slow but meaningful gesture, she opened her arms. Clara felt her chest burst with emotion. 8 years without seeing her, 8 years without feeling her sister's warmth, but now Valentina was there, and for the first time since it all began, Clara did not fail. She leaned down and hugged her sister with all the love she had inside, and Valentina responded by squeezing her with what little strength she had. They didn't need to say anything in that embrace. Everything was said, everything that was lost, everything that still remained, everything that was to come. Time seemed to have slowed down since the day Valentina opened her eyes for the first time. Every small step forward, every whispered word, every slow movement was a silent victory. There were weeks of physical therapy, sessions with doctors, sleepless nights trying to get up again, but above all, they were weeks of a new beginning. Valentina was not yet fully recovered, but she could already sit up without help. She could already hold Lucia in her lap. She was already smiling genuinely. The fear that had previously inhabited her gaze had disappeared. Now there was life there. Now she was safe. When she finally left the hospital, she felt the sun touch her skin as if for the first time. She took a deep breath, closing her eyes. For a moment, she was free. She was alive. Clara and Lucia were by her side, and in that moment they decided they would never be apart again. The old house was left behind. It held too many memories, scars that no longer needed to be relived. With Clara's help, Valentina found a new place to call home, a real home. It was a small, simple house, but it was full of light. The open windows let the wind in, and the walls were painted in cheerful colors. Lucia ran through the rooms, laughing without fear. There were no more screams, no more shadows. The first night, Valentina sat on the sofa, still adjusting to her new routine, watching her daughter play with a colored pencil across the room. Clara was organizing some boxes, trying to hide the fact that she hadn't left yet. Only when Lucia took her aunt's hand and pulled her toward her did Valentina understand. "Aunt Clara, you're going to stay here with us, right?" Clara looked at her sister, then at Lucia, and took a deep breath. For years, she had run away from that place, running away from the pain of the past, from memories she thought could never be repaired. But now, looking at Valentina, seeing her sister alive, seeing Lucia safe, she knew there was nothing left to run from. "Yes," she replied without hesitation. Valentina smiled, and Lucia hugged her aunt tightly. This wasn't just a house. It was a new beginning. The prison was a cold place, cold, lifeless concrete, peeling walls. The smell of dampness mixed with despair permeating the air. Clara had never been there before, and if it were up to her, she would never return. But she had to see. She had to close that chapter. She walked down the narrow corridor, feeling each step echo in the suffocating silence. The guard took her to a room separated by glass. Tomas was already sitting on the other side. He looked different. The expensive suit had been replaced by the beige prison uniform. His hair, always impeccable, was now unkempt. But his eyes were the same, cold and empty, still full of arrogance even after everything. Clara sat down across from him and waited. Tomas said nothing, and neither did she. For a few seconds, the silence was a battlefield between the two of them. Then Clara took a deep breath and spoke. "I thought I had to come here to hear you admit it, to hear you apologize. But now I realize that's never going to happen." Tomas stared at her without blinking. "I could spend hours telling you what you did to Valentina, to Lucia, to the whole family, but you know it. You've always known it, and you have no regrets." He remained silent, but Clara saw his jaw tighten, saw his fingers tense on the table. He didn't like hearing the truth. Clara took a deep breath, maintaining her gaze steady. "You lost." That was what he needed to hear. Tomas narrowed his eyes and finally spoke. "You think you gained something?" Clara gave a half smile without joy. "Yes, I got my sister back. I managed to keep Lucia away from you. And you know what else I gained, Tomas? Peace." She got up, feeling that there was nothing more to say. He stayed there without responding. But Clara saw him. She felt it. In the end, it wasn't her who lost 8 years of her life. It was him. He would never hear Lucia say, "I love you." He would never go home again. He would never have anyone to manipulate again. Tomas could have said nothing, but now that didn't matter. Clara left without looking back. His story ended there. Hers was just beginning. The sun was setting slowly, painting the sky with shades of orange and gold. The new house was silent that afternoon. Lucia was sleeping on the sofa, curled up under a blanket, and Valentina was resting in her room, still weak but improving every day. For the first time in a long time, everything felt peaceful. Clara was sitting on the terrace with an open box on her lap. Inside were all of Valentina's letters, the letters that never reached her. The yellowed envelopes held words that had traveled through time and pain, silent cries that had never been heard until now. Clara took one of the letters and ran her fingers over the worn paper. Her name was written there in her sister's delicate handwriting. She opened the envelope and read again the words she already knew by heart. "Clara, I wish you would come back. I want to tell you so many things, but when I think about calling you, I feel that maybe it's too late. Do you still think about me?" Clara's eyes burned. Valentina thought she didn't care, that time had erased the bond between them, that perhaps Clara had moved on without looking back. Clara held the letter to her chest and closed her eyes, feeling a silent tear fall. "I never stopped thinking about you." She took another letter, then another. Each one carried a piece of her sister's pain, a piece of the story that Clara did not know in time. "If anything happens to me, take care of Lucia. I think he knows I want to leave. He has become more aggressive. I don't know what to do. I still have hope. Clara, maybe one day you'll come back. Maybe one day we can be sisters again." Clara took a deep breath and closed her eyes. For a moment, the letters were a painful reminder of everything Valentina suffered alone, of everything Clara couldn't prevent. But now, she was there. She took the last letter from the still-closed box, with trembling fingers, opened the envelope, and took out the folded paper. The letter was short. "If you're reading this, it means you've finally come back." Clara felt the air leave her. "I wish you had come sooner, but it's okay. You're here now." The tears came before she could stop them. She pressed the letter to her chest and closed the box carefully. It didn't matter that those words hadn't reached her in time, because now she was there, and she would never leave again. The smell of freshly brewed coffee spread through the new house. The sun came in through the kitchen window, illuminating the simple table where Valentina was sitting, still a little tired, but stronger than in recent weeks. Clara prepared breakfast while Lucia drew with crayons, her tongue slightly out, focused on her work. The scene seemed simple, even mundane, but for Clara and Valentina, it was a miracle. There were no screams, no fear, no constant feeling that something bad was about to happen. Just peace. When the plates were ready, Clara set them on the table and looked at her sister. "Have you gotten used to waking up in a place where no one controls you?" Valentina smiled, and there was something genuine there, something that hadn't been seen on her face in a long time. "It seems like a dream," Clara said. She sat down next to her and took her hand on the table. "But it's not. This is your life now." Valentina pressed her lips together, moved. Lucia, who had been listening to the conversation in silence, put down her crayons and approached to them without hesitation. She took her mother's hand and her aunt's hand at the same time. "No one is going to leave now, right?" Clara's heart tightened. The question was innocent, but it carried the fear of a girl who had spent her whole life waiting for the people around her to disappear. Clara looked at Valentina. They didn't need to say anything. They knew what that question meant. Clara squeezed Lucia's hand, feeling her small, warm palm against hers. Never again. Lucia looked at her mother for confirmation. Valentina smiled and pulled her daughter into a tight hug. "Never again, my love." Clara's chest filled with something she hadn't felt in a long time: certainty. All her life she had been running away, trying to escape the pain, trying to forget the past. But what she didn't realize was that she didn't have to run away. She had to stay. She had to fight. And now, looking at her sister, her niece, and the new house they had built together, she finally understood. The past had hurt them all, but the future was theirs. And this time, no one would be left behind. If you were in this story, who would you call first? The police or your family members? Write your thoughts in the comments. Your opinion is very important to us. Check out the videos on the screen. They have all been carefully prepared for you.